Yeah, I think. Well, I think part of what should factor into the decision, not all of it. I think it should be. I think a lot should factor into the decision, but you have to think of the chemistry with Ronnie Bell and Cornelius Johnson because Ronnie Bell is a guy that we everyone thought was going to have a really good year last year. Had an injury early on and missed basically the whole year. To get to that next level and not only get to the college football playoff, but we're talking win a national championship, you're going to have some form of an explosive pass game. Like I think we can all agree on that. Now, whether you need that or not to win the Big Ten, that is up for debate because essentially we watched Michigan, early on in the season just be a run heavy team, and they started to open up more and more, down the line as far as the season went on. But when you ended up squaring up against Georgia, and granted that's the national championship, they pretty much put it to everybody outside of the SEC championship. You saw that Michigan in that game was not on Georgia's level, regardless of how you feel about it. Just in that game, they weren't on that level. And I think an explosive pass game changes things because you look at the only loss that Georgia had against Alabama, it was an explosive pass game that got them there. It was the ability to come out and hit a 50-yard, 60-yard touchdown that changes a lot. And we saw Michigan do that at times last year, but to be able to consistently do that to where you've got a defense that all the time has to worry about potentially a guy running by them and the ball getting thrown over their heads, that changes a lot of things. So that's something that I think you should at least look at a little bit. That shouldn't be the entirety of the quarterback decision of the chemistry with these two guys, but I think I think it should factor in somewhat. So we'll see what happens as far as what does factor into it, but I truly think that with JJ's injury of spring ball, because you look at the spring, like guys develop so much in the spring, and for JJ to not be able to have this spring, I really don't see how JJ can come in and unseat Cade, because essentially what's happening is I'm QB1 all through spring without any competition at all. And we're in, let's say JJ could start throwing in August, or in August he's back to normal. I mean, that's still going to be incredibly difficult for 2 weeks of training camp for Cade to somehow just fall apart. And JJ is, I just don't. If we're talking realistically, like we see what Cade is made of, and we've seen it. Right, he went through adversity, and every game didn't go perfect, and he had mistakes, things like that, and that dude is tough. So I don't see that happening, and to me, I just don't see how JJ will be able to unseat him in 2 weeks of football. I just don't see it.
I think the interesting situation will come into play is, what if Michigan drops a couple of games? Once they get through the cupcake part of the schedule, which is like the first four games, which is essentially like you can combine all four of those teams and line them up, and they still will win the game. My goodness, like what happens if Michigan gets to starts off 4-0, drops two out of their next three, and they're at 5-3, right? What happens in that situation? Do you at that point in time where it may look like at 5-3 that when the Big Ten's out of the question, you would think get to playoff is definitely out of question. Do you flip over the office to JJ? I just feel like as good as, and it's not his fault, man. It really isn't, and it's not to knock Cade. I just still feel like he's on borrowed time, and he's just trying to, he's like a mouse being chased by the cat, and he's barely staying ahead. He's barely staying ahead, and one slip up, and it's like game over. And by all means, this injury to JJ definitely gave him a few steps ahead, right? But I just feel like once the fall starts, once JJ's back 100%, and if the season starts to go a little bit off the rails, and K could be playing like he played last year, the safe game manager, but the team it's going through that development process where they've had some turnover and guys trying to figure their way out. We know the defense. We are anticipating the defense to take a step back, at least initially. So that causes them to drop a couple games mid-season, right? You know, that's where I could see like, all right, JJ takes over, and that's just how I feel. It may be wrong, but I just feel like, Cade is just barely, he's barely clinging on to that job, man. I really do.